Sometimes a dimension style may seem restrictive, especially when dimensions don't go in exactly the way you want them to. Fortunately, AutoCAD makes it easy to modify specific dimensions. You can even break the rules a little bit when it comes to the dimension style settings. Let's take a look. On my screen I have a drawing of a mechanical part. Let me mention that I have already created a dimension style for this drawing, and I've applied some dimensions ahead of time. I'm going to zoom in on the top view, and I will launch the linear dimension tool, and I'd like to dimension from this upper right endpoint to the center of this circle. Now I'll pull the dimension up and I'll place it in an arbitrary location. Now it would be nice if this dimension was aligned to the other. One way we can adjust the placement of our dimensions is through the use of grips. If I click to select this, you can see there are several grips available. If you click the grip on the text, you can reposition the text on the dimension line. You can even pull it outside the dimension line if you want to. I am going to put this back to the middle, and I'm going to grab the grip at the end of the arrowhead. I will pull this up and snap it to the arrowhead of the other dimension. There is one more change that needs to be made. Notice the extension line is overriding my center line. I'm going to click the grip at the end of the extension line, and I'll pull that up and snap it to the end of my center line geometry. When I'm finished, I'll press Escape. Let's pan down to the front view, and I'll create another linear dimension. This time I'll grab the endpoints of this chamfer. I'll pull this over to the left, and I'd like this dimension to line up with the one beneath it. So I will snap this to the endpoint of the arrowhead. Take a look at this text. It's running across the extension line. Knowing what we know now, if I click to select this, I could grab the grip, but as I pull this, I end up pulling the entire dimension. Let's press Escape. Instead of selecting the grip, I'm going to hover over it. Notice the options I get in the menu. From here I'm going to select Move with Leader. I can then pull the dimensions with the leader over to the other side. When I'm finished, I'll press Escape. Let's pan the front view over. This time I'd like to dimension the width of this end. We'll use the linear tool, and I'll snap to the endpoint here and to the endpoint here. Be sure to explore the other options that are available in that menu. Let's zoom out. We'll go back to the top view. I will launch the linear tool again. This time I'll create a dimension from this upper right endpoint to the center line of the part, and I'll pull this over to the right. Notice this dimension is 2 decimal places. I happen to know that measurement is 0.875. Now I could go in and edit the dimension style, but then all of my dimensions will be 3 decimal places. Instead, I'd like to make that change to this dimension only. If I select the dimension and right click, right here in the top of the menu, you'll find a precision setting. From here I can come over and select 3 decimal spaces, and the setting is applied to this dimension only. I'm going to select this again, and I'll right click. Notice in addition to changing the precision, we can also remove the style overrides. That will put this dimension back the way it was. We can also use the dimension style menu to assign a new dimension style to this dimension, or we could save this dimension as its own style. I am going to press Escape to close the menu and deselect the object. Let's pan this back to the front view. I'll create a linear dimension, and we will dimension from the top of this chamfer to the top edge of this extension. I'll get in here a little closer. Notice I have an extension line that's unnecessary. It's running on top of the part. Once again, I don't want to turn this off in the dimension style, or I'll lose the extension line for all of my dimensions. Let's pan this over. The way I am going to fix this is by selecting the dimension, and I'll come over to the Properties palette. Mine happens to be anchored to the interface. If yours is not, you can press Ctrl 1 to bring your palette up on screen. As I drag the slider down, take a look at the names of the major headings: lines and arrows, text, fit, primary units, alternate units. These headings are the same as the tabs that we see in the dimension style. This means I have access to every dimension style setting for this dimension only. I'll drag this up to the lines and arrows section, then I'll come down to extension line 2, and I'll turn that off. When I'm finished, I'll press Escape to deselect. Using the Properties palette, each dimension can have its own custom settings. Let's pan over to the right side view. I'll go back to the linear tool, and we will dimension the width of this tab. I will also align this to the previous dimension. This is another instance where the measurement should be to 3 decimal spaces. Knowing what we know now, I could select this and right click and change the precision. I could also select it, go over to the Properties palette, come down to the Primary Units section, and I could change the precision here. Just another way to accomplish the same task. Let's do one more. I'd like to dimension this radius. I'll launch the radius command. I'll select the arc and I'll pull the dimension out to here. Notice there was no center mark. In fact, if I pan this to the top view, you can see that my diameter dimensions are not giving a center mark either. That's because I chose to create my center marks manually. So that feature is turned off in the dimension style. In this case, however, I would like the mark turned on. We can select this, go over to the Properties palette, and in the Lines and Arrows section, I will turn the center mark on, and I'm going to make it a little smaller. Let's set it to 0.04. Finally, since this dimension is the same on both sides, I'd like to make this a typical dimension. To do that, I'll double click on the text. This gives me access to the text editor. I'll click the right arrow to move my cursor to the end of the line and press enter, and then I'll type TYP for typical, and then I'll click on the screen to close the editor. Think of the style as the starting point for all dimensions. In the event you have dimensions with specific requirements, you can easily customize them using the Grips right-click menu or Properties palette.